Every sports fan out there has multiple teams, from players to stats and to starting and sitting. Fantasy football is officially a national obsession. So what accounts for the popularity of this adult playground? Time to oil up that pigskin and go long, suckers. It's The Loop. Joining us via satellite tonight in Boston, author of Committed: Confessions of a Fantasy Football Junkie, Mark St. Amant is here from Bloomington, Indiana. John Infante from TacoJohn.net and from Dallas, Texas. David Corey, co-owner of fantasy football site TheHuddle.com and author of Brady Game's Fantasy Football Handbook. Gentlemen, welcome to The Loop. Thanks for taking a break from the drafts and the Yahoo pages and all that other jazz to be here. Mark, there's all these studies about productivity that gets lost around fantasy football time, and the statistics are interesting, and it's sad that it happens at the workplace. You took it to a whole new level of crazy, though. You quit your job to play fantasy football. What's with the obsession here? Maybe you can explain it to me a little bit. Why is America so obsessed with this game?
Well, I mean, I think part of it is the camaraderie. You know, people love the competition. People love just getting together with their buddies and talking smack and just kicking each other's asses. I mean, it's, like you said, I quit my job, a full-time job, to play fantasy football full-time because I'd never won my league at that point. And I started playing in '98 and got very quickly obsessed. You know, it's just a fun social hobby.
And your wife completely understood that reasoning when you explained it to her at home.
Well,
after she finished packing the suitcase.
Exactly. After she just shot a blow dart into my neck. I had to convince her that something productive was going to come out of this. So
all right,
I said,
now, John,
I'm going to quit my job to play full time.
The poll question that we had is, John, isn't D&D just isn't fantasy football just D&D for jocks essentially? Isn't it just a nerd game for football fans? What do you think, John?
It really is. It's essentially, you sit down and draft a team just like you create a character. You watch the games just like you roll the dice, and you end up playing this fantasy role just like D&D players are warlocks and wizards.
Mark, you seem amused by that explanation there. You disagree?
Yeah, it's pretty amusing. It sounded very practiced. The D&D thing is just like the old sort of cliched standby at this point. Fantasy football is so mainstream that the people who are against it kind of sound like the rent-a-cop security guards, like shooing the skateboarders out of the public park.
Get off these rails!
Get out of my yard!
David was actually giggling at the answer, though. David, why were you giggling at the answer that D&D is essentially the same thing as fantasy football?
Well, people have to understand, don't fear what you don't understand. The fantasy football, you have the number one sport in the country. And now all those people who love football get to interact with that thing, as Mark said. You get to have a league. The experience of fantasy football is as much about football as it is about the social skills.
Can having a fantasy team
actually in the draft you have before the season even starts?
Now, what was that? Go ahead there, David.
I just said, the big thing, the biggest fun in fantasy football is when you have your draft. You get together with everybody. You get to make fun of everybody's picks. It's just a big party you get to have. Women, they have their candle parties and Tupperwares and things.
Their baby-making gatherings and their dishwashing ceremonies. We know the women have their own thing.
This is what guys can do.
Now, John, what about having a fantasy team?
Game.
Can having a fantasy team take away from loyalty from you having your own favorite team, John? Does it get you rooting for the wrong guy?
No.
Absolutely.
You have to love football in order to want to play fantasy football. It's just an extension of the game.
Which is why it doesn't drive any interest in the game. It's already people who love football enough to spend hundreds of dollars on magazines, leagues, and they're not loving football more. They're simply loving individual players. A guy who has Marvin Harrison on his fantasy team is not watching the Colts to watch a well-oiled offensive machine. He's watching the Colts to see one player play half the game.
That's true. Mark, is it true that fantasy football can take the focus away from the team and put it on individual players?
No, I think that if anything, it drives the average fan to know more about the NFL and only increases the love of the NFL. You know about more players
and stats, not more about teams and systems and the way the game is played.
Sure you do. You have to know the system before you can draft and rank your players.
Play fantasy football. The first game they want to watch is their local team. Now, once that's over, they want to go watch to see what their players are because they're interacting with the game. It's more fun and exciting than Dungeons and Dragons.
John, don't be
especially
afraid of
real
what you
people.
don't know now, David. Don't be
These are
afraid
real
of what you don't know.
things.
John, final question to
Yeah.
you. What's it going to? What do you think? Is this just a fad like poker on television and the internet?
Well, I don't think it's ever going to go back to what it was in 1998 or 1995 when people were doing Excel spreadsheets. But eventually, the NFL will find something else to promote, and fantasy football will go down a little bit. But even I won't argue that it's going away.
All right, we will see. It's a little bit jock, a little bit geek, but it seems like no matter where you look, someone is wasting hours of their day trying to draft the best players. And you know what? More power to them. We can all be geeks about everything. To all the fantasizers out there, let the games begin tomorrow. Good luck, everybody. Thanks to Mark, John, and David for keeping us in the loop. It was a pleasure, gentlemen.